Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Ash. I use any pronouns. I am the Impact Project Coordinator here in ADOC. Really glad that you're joining us today, this afternoon. Um, ADOC is a network of Asian American documentary filmmakers, and our new Impact initiative aims to it builds off the work of our ADOC Haverford Impact Lab that Cecilia Mejia spearheaded. And we also have an upcoming Impact Fellowship that we will share about soon. But the Impact Working Group includes myself and project leads PJ Roval and Gary Leonard. And we're aiming to provide the ADOC network with um, a shared understanding and analysis of how film and storytelling can support and create social change for our communities. So this is a really exciting session that we have programmed today as it centers around policy change. We're going to be thinking about, in general, I think these panels, we're really aiming to redefine impact and think about how impact can look like through a lens of cultural strategy, political education, and the way documentary filmmaking and storytelling can be used as a tool in that context. So I'm going to pass it on to Wynton, who is our moderator for this session. A quick introduction. Wynton Wong is a storyteller across a variety of mediums, including film, television, audio, and interactive. Born in Hong Kong and raised in North Carolina, she has always tied social exploration and change to storytelling. She has worked at Universal Cable Productions, the It Gets Better project, The Outline, The Markup, and other projects on set, as well as a producer. She currently works at the nonprofit newsroom, The 19th News, as the multimedia producer, where she produces in-person and virtual events, editorial pieces, and other content. And she was the programming manager at Asian Cinevision, Asian American International Film Festival for 3 years, and has worked at other festivals including AFI Fest, Austin Film Festival, Brooklyn Horror Film Festival, Jock NYC, Full Frame, Hamptons Film Festival, Nantucket Film Festival, Tribeca Film Festival, and others. So Wynton, I'm gonna pass it to you.
Thanks so much, Ash, and thanks for organizing all of this and all of us together. Before I get started, I'll do a brief visual description. I am a young, I'm going to say young person of Chinese descent, long black hair, wearing a black shirt, and I am wearing a brown jade necklace. And also moving forward, I also want to recognize I reside and work on Lenape land and pay respect and honor to the caretakers of this land from time immemorial until now and into the future. I'm going to introduce all of our panelists for today first, and then I'll let them self-describe themselves and give their own land acknowledgement, if applicable, after the first question, just so that we can all set the stage. So I'm going to start. Natalie Pattillo is a writer and filmmaker. She is co-director, writer, and producer of the feature documentary And So I Stayed, which tells the story of survivors of abuse who are unjustly criminalized for their acts of survival. And So I Stayed received the Spirit and Audience Awards at Brooklyn Film Festival and the SEMA 2023 Jury Prize for Systemic Change Award. An independent film director, Natalie's work has been supported by Perspective Fund, Chicken and Egg Pictures, New York Council on the Arts, Firelight Media, Studio 9, and others. She was awarded the Media Award for the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence in 2020. She is the co-founder and head of story of Full Picture Studios, a storytelling decarceration project that aims to free survivors of abuse who are unjustly incarcerated. Natalie, if you want to do your visual description and your land acknowledgement.
Yeah, thanks so much, Wynton, and thank you all for being here today. I reside and work in the land of the Narragansett tribe, and visual description, I am a brown Malay Indian, also young woman with my black hair that is slicked back with a neon yellow sweater and colorful acrylic, I think they are acrylic, earrings.
Great earrings. Our next panelist is Yin Q. They are a queer parent and core organizer of Red Canary Song, a grassroots collective based in Flushing, New York City, that advocates for sex work decriminalization and protective policies and provides resources to the migrant massage workers. As founder and creative director of Kink Out, they have produced media, art, and education to museums such as New York Performance Space, the Whitney Museum, Leslie Bowman, and were selected as artist in residence at MoMA PS1 for the winter 2019-20 season, and Brown University for spring 2023. Their work has been recognized by Spike Lee in his tribute to Jackie Robinson as one of the current impact activists. Their media work includes Mercy Mistress and Fly in Power, a featured documentary that centers the narrative and issues of migrant massage workers and sex workers of Asian diaspora and the power of dim sum. Yingqiu is currently curating an art exhibit and performance for NYU's APA Gallery, supported by CSGS. Our Inner Quarters is an installation and live performance that explores the intimate spaces of work and care of Red Canary Song, while also examining the hypersexualization of Asian femme bodies. The show runs from October 30th, December 8th at 20 Cooper Square here in New York City. And if you'd like to do a description and land acknowledgement.
Sure, thank you, Wynton. And thank you to everyone for being here. I am a wonderfully oak-aged, middle-aged, non-binary person of Chinese descent as well. And I have short black hair and I'm wearing a white t-shirt, and there's lots of sunshine just kind of streaking across my face at the moment.
Great. And then our last panelist for today is Amritpal Kaur. Kaur is a queer, undocumented Punjabi Sikh storyteller and co-founder of Brown Girl Joy Productions. She co-founded Brown Girl Joy Productions with two of her siblings who are also queer Punjabi storytellers. With BGJ Productions, they recently wrote and directed a narrative short film called Zindagi Dobara, which is currently in the festival and distribution phases through 2024. In June, they graduated from UC Santa Cruz with an MFA in social documentation and is currently an instructor there for two undergraduate colleges. They are currently working on developing their first documentary feature film. Amrit.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Kaur. I'm so glad to be here and so glad to be among such amazing folks as well. For a visual description, I have medium black hair. I'm wearing I'm not sure what color this, it's like blue, light blue, short sleeve shirt. I'm medium brown toned. I am a Punjabi Indian person. So yeah, I have braces as well. Have kind of a lisp right now from an oral surgery I just had. So yeah, that's that. And then I am for land acknowledgements, Los Angeles, specifically Tongva land. So just wanted to mention that. And yeah, thank you for having us.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks everybody for coming to see us talk. So I'm just gonna get started. So all of y'all's work have ties to particular issues and particular policy work. Could you briefly talk about your journey into the issue, as well as into bringing narrative work to that issue? And then how perhaps you finally got into kind of the specific policy or legislation that gets tied into your respective work. I'll start with Natalie.
Yeah, that's a great question. So hopefully I can answer it in a not long-winded way, but it feels long-winded in how long the process was. But yeah, I got into the work of And So I Stayed, which is a feature documentary about survivors of abuse who are unjustly incarcerated for their acts of survival. It was a master's project, which was at the time written work back in 2015. When I was a grad student getting my journalism degree. And because of personal experience with domestic violence, I had lost my sister to domestic violence and had unfortunately experienced it myself. I kind of knew that domestic violence was a topic, an issue that I wanted to cover going into journalism school, and did a lot of research and learned more about how vast the criminalization of survivors really is. At the time, this was pre-Me Too, so there wasn't a lot of conversation or space for gender-based violence as being a sort of issue that newsrooms in particular focused on with nuance, care, or sensitivity. And so and also the data wasn't out there in terms of like how extensive it was that survivors were being criminalized or incarcerated for self-defense or being coerced. So with that, I sort of started exploring. I was at the time living in New York, and there happened to be a piece of legislation that was being carried out by a formerly incarcerated survivor, several of them activists who were working together with lawyers and organizers. It is called the New York Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act, and it aims to give less harsh sentences to folks who are where gender-based violence or some sort of violence related to interpersonal violence is involved. It takes that into consideration. And so, yeah, that's how I came, through this work with policy in mind, and was just sort of tracking this incredible survivor, Kim Dadu Brown's work in and her, her community's work in trying to get this bill turned into a law.
Thanks, Natalie. Yin?
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, coming from lived experience of being a sex worker myself for the past 30 years, I've always been part of different sex worker movements, activist movements, mostly for the first 20 years, I will say, of my career in sex work. It was primarily harm reduction. And really, though the words and the rallies would shout for decriminalization of sex work, I didn't really see the real works of creating policies and then starting the writing of a true bill until some very strong lawyers were able to come into the work with us, many of them who were former sex workers themselves, coming in and starting to really draft bills and policies to look at how are we going to start creating something to protect workers, but also decriminalize the work itself. So working with Regnary Song since 2018, I'm not somebody who understands policy off the bat. I can't describe to you all of the work and the bills and sort of the language. I feel like that kind of language can be really inaccessible, and so that's the reason why I basically committed to creating the documentary and trying to find ways of getting the media that can bring the messaging out there to the people, because something that Elena says in the documentary itself is about how there's policy, but there's also culture change, right? If we can change people's minds about how they think about migrant massage workers, sex workers, and people who get into the erotic industry, whether it's for survival or by choice, then we can really look at how to start to disseminate and create laws to protect people.
Thank you, Ian. And Amrit, if you could speak to just balancing your own advocacy work, your own identity, with deciding to use storytelling and enter this industry of storytelling.
Yeah, thank you. I also wanted to say thank you, Natalie and Yin, for sharing. Y'all's work is really empowering to me too. And I wanted to just share that I'm currently developing my first feature film documentary that is a expansion of what I did for my MFA dissertation and thesis film at UC Santa Cruz. So for starters, for my background, I also have lived experiences as an undocumented low-income queer person. I'm also the eldest of 5 kids in a family, and so it was a lot growing up to balance helping my parents, helping our family figure a lot of things out. And then I grew up in a time of post 9/11 xenophobia that many Muslim and Sikh individuals faced, and so in my family, I have two individuals, my father and my brother, who wear a turban and have beards. Well, my brother's 17, so his is kind of coming in now. But it was an interesting time, and it still is an interesting time, thinking about being someone of Punjabi descent, and also just someone um, of the undocumented experience. And I think the documentary that I am developing now is actually exploring my family's, not just my migration diaspora from Punjab, India to the US, but also a lot of the interwoven violence and abuse that my parents and I have, and my siblings have faced, not just from like community members within the South Asian community, but like a lot of different systems here, and especially like the healthcare system, the education system, places like that. And I think the biggest thing that I have taken from this story, the story that's continuously unfolding, is like thinking about how people in my positions and my family's positions, right, are continuously going through so many of these things and continuously experiencing trauma, reliving a lot of experiences. And for me, I think as an undocumented person, like I did a lot of community organizing back in my early 20s, and I'm now in my mid 20s, but it burnt me out. Like policy work, I think sometimes feels like a hopeless landscape, and it feels like a place where so much of for me personally, like creativity that I have sometimes seems like is going to die. And so I think for me with this documentary, that the one thing that I'm hoping to do is I really, really want to get advanced parole to be able to go to Punjab, India, and see what's left of my family there, which is not many people now. Like a lot of folks, our relatives have like passed on. A lot of them have moved on. A lot of them have had to shift to different places because of instability in Punjab. And the biggest thing for me is also like, it's a touchy topic, but we had to move here because of I think like femicide. My mom was experiencing a lot of abuse from her in-laws because she had two daughters in Punjab at the time when you weren't really allowed to have girls. And so that's something that I, as someone who's her age now, when she had me, have really been thinking about. And so it's taking me a lot of reflection and time to kind of get a sense of like where I'm going to be placing myself. But this film will definitely have a really, really big not just impact campaign, but advocacy work that's tied in, because that's how my sisters and I in Brown Girl Drag Productions do our work. Is like we make sure that like before we even build a story, we build a film, like we think about the intentions and we think about like the people who are behind not just the films, but also in front of the camera, and like how we might be implicating and also like causing a lot of transgressive like issues in those people's lives who are right, like our collaborators and things like that. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. Like that's kind of where I'm at. So thank you for allowing me to share. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for sharing such a personal and personal history with us, and thank you for bringing up kind of the well-being aspect of it. We'll definitely go back to that. We'll put a pin on it. Yin, you had mentioned this briefly, and I would love both you and Natalie's thoughts on this, which is policy is kind of complicated, but the policy is deeply tied to personal lives and personal stories, and both of y'all's films show off kind of how impactful policy or lack of policy is on people. How do you balance making sure you're explaining the legislation, the action, the impact, while still telling the stories of the people who have been impacted? Yin, if you want to start.
Yeah, I think just having a really good team of like constantly watching and really looking at how the documentary starts to form was important. I mean, the many iterations of watching and rewatching and trying to thread together the personal narratives and stories with somebody who was doing the policy work in Albany so that those storylines and then the policy impact could be really make sense of but I also just want to mention that there was also a big shift in our film that towards the policy and adding more about the policy, because a lot of our personal narratives were edited out. And this is something about like working with undocumented and people who are at risk, and sex workers and migrant workers, women who are in the lines of possible harm from people. So we did a lot of work, film work together, but we were all in safe spaces. But then as the film started to progress to the point where, okay, it's going to get on screen, and a few weeks, about 2 weeks prior to our launch screening, we were asked by by one of the narrators, personal characters, to take out a good 40% of the film. And we have to respect that, because it is their story. And so we really took, then shifted to be much more about the policy than we had actually intended at first. So it was almost an accidental shift, but I think that I think that in the end it really worked well. And and speaking about intention of like how you go into these kinds of films when you're working with people who really have so much to lose, and to really honor and be sure that they are constantly going to be checked in with, emotionally, not only before the film as the editing process. We really brought them in to be part of the editing process all the way, and then even afterwards too, because to be able to like be emotionally held afterwards is so important, right? Seeing yourself on screen, seeing your stories on screen can be really, really scary.
Definitely. Natalie?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Yin, for sharing. And the word intention keeps coming up, and I think that's how to guide us in doing this work. And the policy could be a big thread in the story, or be an element that we're sort of trying to understand, or hoping will get past, or hoping will be used as a tool. But I think as storytellers, and particularly documentary filmmakers who do want to make an impact in the communities that we are in, or a part of, or help uplift the stories of, the intention behind the work has to be clear, because there are many points in which we were following this piece of legislation that was pending, and sort of the stories, the people's lives that were dependent on this legislation passing, whether it was, Kim, whose work, she spent all of her time in prison, and then when she got out, trying to get this bill into a law and hoping to see it through. And then we had Nikki Adamando, who was waiting for this legislation to become law so it could impact her. And then we have all the women who are currently incarcerated who could use it as a pathway. And a lot of times when we were in spaces, documentary spaces, it was like, oh, you guys are making a true crime. And it's like, no, we are absolutely not making a true crime. Or how about you make it a true crime? Or what about this side? What about their side? What about that person's side? So we stayed very true to following the efforts of getting, the grassroots efforts started with folks who were, lawyers visiting the prisons, as well as like folks who are currently incarcerated and formerly incarcerated, and following that and trying to understand, also that like they don't, not necessarily everyone thinks this is the most progressive bill ever, or law. And it's not the perfect silver, like solution to this, because it still criminalizes people. It's just looking at less harsh sentencing. So we were really careful with our intention, and very clear with even all of the like production companies or folks who wanted to like involve themselves with us, because we had so much footage after, you know, we're following it for like years, almost a decade, that we were like, that's not what we're doing. We're not going to be involved in that. You can't take our footage. We won't license it to you. You know, it was, so that policy meant a lot to people because people's lives are behind the policy. And like, another thing was that there was a time where we were following the bill, and then, you know, it passed. Like it was like, much to everyone, including Kim's disbelief, we were like, it's now a law. And we thought to ourselves like, oh, okay, yeah, like activism works, happy ending, this is great. And all of our like our collective guts were like, how will it be implemented? Let's keep the camera like going and let's see how it impacts people's lives. So policy work, yes, get the bill passed, get the thing done, decarcerate an individual, but what happens after you acquire the policy or you get the freedom? You know, those sort of like things that do matter, as well as, you know, there's no end result. You know, you keep on and you hopefully you pass it along to another like group of advocates, because we can't all be in every, you know, part of the work, but that we follow it like through, I think is really keyed. And you know, putting like policy is just people, like what that's, I mean, but the powerful ones try to complicate it further into some hypothetical things that are really hard to understand, to Yin's point. Like it took me years to be able to say all of those things about the DVSJA. The acronym is long. It took me years to be able to say it in a like 2-sentence thing. This is what the bill does, and these are whose lives could be affected. So yeah, I hope I answered.
Yeah, no, you did, and you've opened many doors for us to potentially follow. And you know, I think again, right, intention, I think follow through is like another great word that I think we should all kind of consider and hold. And I want to go back to this well-being angle that Amrit kind of opened us up to, which is that like documentary itself is already a long process, and policy is notoriously also a long process of bureaucracy and legislation and things like that. So I want to ask all of y'all, like, I think whether it was on purpose or not, right? All of your work touches on kind of gender-based violence and biases in that sense, institutional biases in that sense. How do you make sure that you're like checking in on yourself, that you're checking in with your subjects? Is it a function of creating systems or structures, or is there something else that you found kind of along the way as you're navigating this work? Because yeah, you're probably spending a lot of time researching, diving into things, and you're by yourself, right, doing the work. Amrit, if you want to start, how are you taking care of yourself as you're diving into this kind of heavy work?
I think the biggest way is by taking breaks. I haven't touched some of my work since like I think like July or August. Well, also I graduated in June, and so that was already like a big burnout. Thank you. That was already like a big burnout moment where I was like, oh gosh, I want to cry every single day. And I did. I cried through June, and that helped. But yeah, I think sometimes like understanding that like for me, I think, and everyone else who does this work, I think understanding that like as passionate as we are with all of the work that we want to do, and as much as we have like I want to save the world in us, in our hearts, like there has to be moments where we do step away and where we do take introspective time to ourselves and like really hold ourselves in whatever ways we can. For me personally, like as an undocumented person, I still don't have access to like therapy and like proper mental health resources. So I think that like oftentimes what I've learned to do now as I've gotten older is like just holding personal space, like I mentioned. And I think just making sure that I have people in my life, my loved ones, who understand like where I'm at and communicating that. And then I think like also like seeing the larger scope of whatever stories are being built, right? And also like continuously understanding like how I fit into them, especially as someone who is creating a story that I'm not only impacted by, but that I am in. I think it's about like being able to like go in and out and make sure that like the process is even though it's like always unfolding, that it's a process that feels um holistic and caring and nurturing and good. And I feel like even though documentary filmmaking, oftentimes we might not have close connections with the people that we work with initially, right? I think being able to not just build close connections, but build a space for tenderness for ourselves and other people that we are collaborating with is really important. And just humanizing ourselves and humanizing myself, I think, has really allowed me to be okay with a lot of the things that I consider even mess ups. I'm like, I should have done this first, I should have done that. Like, there's too many things. And I think that just understanding we're human beings and we can allow ourselves some breathing room and space is the place that I'm at right now. Yeah.
Thank you. Yin, could you talk a little bit more about kind of the consistency of care throughout this long process that you're in?
Sure. I think, it's so important, and I think probably everyone will say this as well, of like important about building a really good team that you trust, and that we're all humans, and also being many of us being either in the work of that we're or having lived experience of what we are actually filming itself, that there are going to be times when we may re-traumatize each other. The work itself can re-traumatize us for in terms of facing a lot of past harms that might be coming up. So I'll say, like, when I when I say that I believe in the power of dim sum, I really mean it. Of like coming together and like being able to eat together, remembering like just the sensual parts of our bodies that just need so much care, of like being able to have meals together, dance together, breathe, just really be in spaces where we can actually relax and not be working, and not feeling like we have to be producing, and just really celebrating each other in different ways. So yeah, in terms of like just getting to eat, getting to take care of one another, and doing a lot of forgiving, because things are going to come up during productions. It's many years, people come in and out. I have during our particular time, it was a 4-year production time of filming and editing. There were 2 people who had where there was a clash, and we had to really smooth things out, because we are people, we're humans who are also going through so much traumas ourselves, whether it's pandemic or otherwise. Yeah, so that's, and also in terms of my personal care, one of the things I really love to do is to bring people out into the woods. I do live outside of the city now in the Poconos, and so bring my city folks, bringing the workers out from Flushing and bringing them into the woods. A lot of Slide and Power actually does show our retreats where we're in the woods and we're making kimchi outside of my backyard and such. So much to the point where I said, like, oh, if we should have too much of this footage, people are just going to think that we've already gotten there. We're in this like heaven of like just good food and like beautiful trees. So it was really like looking for that balance of, yes, we have to celebrate each other, and we have to use whatever privileges we have to be able to constantly like bring other people to that.
Yeah, and Natalie, would love to hear what you have to say on this, especially because you did have that kind of up and down of like the bill actually passed, and then the ramifications of what's been happening even after the bill is part of New York State.
Yeah, no, I so appreciate hearing everyone's responses and processes. It's so healing. But yeah, it's very, and the road is long, right? Like in this work. And to both Amrit and Yin's points, like giving yourself space, building trust with the team, like understanding we're all human, those were all really important things that I sort of am realizing after I burnt out really hard, right? Like it took like me really doing the, like, I have to be in it, like self-sacrifice, like these people who are incarcerated don't get to put their kids to bed, but I do. That's not fair. And like my survivor's guilt was so immense that like I wasn't even living. I was just sort of like, I don't know. It was a very it was a really painful time. And like, or like, my sister died and I didn't, like, all of these really complicated things that come up when you are going through it, like we all are when we have lived experience, or parallel traumas that could sort of kick up these sort of like things that we didn't expect to come up. And I am grateful for realizing the burnout, and that I had an amazing co-director with me and a team with me who sort of, we built a sort of like, hey, let's think about self-care now that the film is out, and what can we do about it? What sort of structure can we create around our care, the people who are in the film's care, our crew's care? And I think a lot of the time, I heard this from Annie Mercedes of Looky Looky Pictures when I was going through her guided campaign group that she has, and it was, don't manage your time, manage your energy, which I thought, it just really resonated with me, where it's like, I don't want to fucking write a bit like a grant right now for whatever. And like I used to force myself to, because it's like, well, if I don't do it, then I won't, like, we can't continue the work, or people can't get paid. And I just, that little shift sort of gave me the opportunity, like, I will get this work done. But right now I am going to hang out with my kids and put my phone away, and no one is going to email me or text me. These hours are sacred to me. And so learning what my hours were that were not like my actual do not disturb hours were really critical. And yeah, I think, laughing with people, when you turn off the cameras are really off. Like, we're not like, oh, let's turn it back on. It's like, no, we were done filming today, and enjoying a meal, as Tian's point, bringing people together through food. I found that in production, looking back now, that was like how we ended every shoot, was like we all ate or sat together, and we put the equipment back in the car. It was a sort of ritualistic ending to, let's now be together, which is also part of the work. Just another important part that we might ignore, because we're so, well, did we get this shot, did we get that shot, or and when you're doing work around impact and screenings too, building the self-care around what do I want to make myself available for? What do we have the funding to make ourselves available for? Does everyone even want to be visible like this, and making sure you safety plan for everyone involved, including yourselves as filmmakers, because yeah, it's a lot to hold space for. And we spoke before briefly, and I said, like, this was a few months ago, where I was just trying to find, get the funding to continue this work, this decarceration work through video storytelling that I've been doing with my co-director, Dan Nelson. And the work is incredible and gratifying, but it was very exhausting to try and find the funding, and also then find childcare for my youngest. And then I realized, like, I am finally in a place where my partner is like, I've got this, like, you don't have to, like, we've moved out of New York City, like we'll be okay. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to take a maternity leave 3 years later, I have 3 kids and I've never taken a maternity leave ever. I've never had the opportunity to freelancing. My first, I was a single mom. And so I've reframed this time right now as the maternity leave or parental leave that I never got to have. So I just hang out with my son at the playground and have the best time looking for acorns. So that's my self-care right now, and gardening and just like reconnecting to all the softer parts, instead of like the rage and the like what to do with the rage. Right now I'm like, I want to feel joy again. And yeah, and really relish in it.
Thank you for sharing, and I hope there are many acorns. There's like I think DC, there's some city or state that is actively asking for acorns to plant trees, I believe. So the acorns can go somewhere and not just like
I will make a note of that. DC.
Yeah,
acorns,
not,
and then I won't.
somewhere some government is
Okay.
this is the new policy, acorn policy.
Acorn policy.
I want to kind of also keep following this thread of kind of like follow through and like guilt and intention. Y'all all have lived experience within kind of the issues that you speak about, and you know, bureaucracy is bureaucracy, and there's these moments where it speeds up and speeds down. There's real urgency, there's false urgency, on top of the fact that, right, all of these things impact very real people that may not have, you know, the luxury of space and time and resources to not have change happen in a certain right period of time. But institutions and systems don't always particularly allow for certain things. So I want to ask all of y'all, how do you navigate balancing what may be real urgency, right? And then what is, at this point, I think, learned urgency within kind of the government structure of things. And then the additional, I think, pressure of when your film's call to action is so tied to, let's say, a particular piece of policy, the pressure you may be getting from, you know, the people that are either part of the policy team, or in general your community that's like, we want, you know, this needs to be on the docket next session immediately, and if you're not doing these things, how are people going to know, and all that kind of stuff. How do you kind of navigate balancing those priorities when you also just spent years making the film? Yin, since your piece of legislation is still in committee hearings, I think probably you're in the most kind of tenuous space. If you could speak a little bit about, yeah, balancing all of those competing needs.
Sure. So I just want to say that as part of like an organizer for a Canary Song, I'm part of the team that gets people money for mutual aid. So I'm constantly hearing like real urgency of like personal urgency of what's happening out there, of like, how do we shift money to get bail? How do we shift money to somebody who's going injured, who is, you know, going through certain like crises? So there's that urgency that, you know, I keep with my team in Red Canary Song in like containers of having to step away. Yeah, of like how long can I take those emails? How many people can I speak to? How do we get and then I, you know, it's really about our outreach team that does that the most. In terms of policy, it is going to be a slow moving glacier, and I have accepted that. As I said, I've been in this for 30 years. It's not like I'm going anywhere. So there are the people who are on the policy front who are doing fantastic work. We are going through all of like, yeah, every aspect, every perspective to make sure that people are protected. Because yeah, exactly as you all have mentioned, you can't just bring up a bill, decriminalize, and then there it is, because as we've seen from other types of industries, such as the marijuana industry, it does not necessarily mean the best for the people who were actually in the industries in the first place. So there are there is definitely this feeling of like, I'm sitting here, I'm waiting, I'm not going anywhere. It's you know, so I don't feel the urgency on the policy side necessarily. I see it really from like the people who are impacted, and I feel in terms of getting the work out there, the frustration that I knew going in was that for somebody to sit to a feature-length documentary, that means they want to already learn about this issue in the first place. They're likely like, close to already agreeing with me, or but just want to know more about it, or like somewhere in the middle. And I think that when we talk about the word like trafficking per se, there's such a huge that movement is so strong. It's so celebrity fueled, white celebrity fueled, by Ashton Kutcher and all of the white, Amy Schumer, all these people who are like have so much money and so much influence with the trafficking narrative, that what I'm looking to do now is shifting into like, okay, how do we take what we've got from the documentary and make it digestible? So I'm actually going to be meeting with teams of people who are younger than me who can like get it out to media like TikTok, of how do we get this information out there to combat like what is already so overwhelming from Hollywood, right? And to really, so that people can get this in like short downloads. And unfortunately, that's how most people get their news now, right? They don't sit down to a full like documentary. They barely like sit down to like even a short documentary anymore. Now it's like within 3-minute bites. So unfortunately, that's something that I'm looking into now too. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Yin. And Natalie, if you could speak again to the balancing of priorities, and then also now your continued follow through in the work with kind of this decarceral video work.
Yeah. So a little bit of context if it's helpful. Part of so when the bill became law, we were like following how Tanisha would be affected, who she was at the time currently incarcerated, as well as Nikki Adamando, who at the time was facing trial and sentencing. And so the bill became law, and then, everyone's hopes were obviously way up. And it was like, wow, this is great. As I said earlier, happy ending, great. And so we, we followed how the law was implemented, especially in Nikki's case. And unfortunately, the trial judge did not think she qualified, even though there were mountains and mountains of evidence. And that was, there's not a word for how painful that was for, not just that case, but it felt like it set a precedent. Thankfully, the appellate court overturned that. But that, that was we didn't know. We didn't know that was coming up 3 years after. And then in Tanisha's case, we, built partnership with her and her lawyers and trust, and shared a lot of things that we had learned about her and her family and her story that the lawyers had just never really opened up before. Because, they're thinking facts. They're trying to like, what are the facts of the case? How can we put the facts that, look the best? It's all about optics and less about humans to a certain extent. And so when the bill became law, for Tanisha's case, we asked like if we could give footage to the lawyers before, so this is before the film was released, and we turned it into, they said yes, and they were like, you might get subpoenaed. And I was like, okay, fine. Like, all my notes are going to say is that this woman does not need to be in prison because she was defending her life. There was a lot of safety planning around it though. What we did was we put together the footage of Tanisha and her family, as well as an interview with Tanisha, and into a 5-minute short film. So to Ian's point, something digestible that was then presented. So how the law works is that it goes to the original prosecutor, which that is really hard. So it goes back to the prosecutor who decided this person should be in prison, and as well as the judge. And they watch this 5-minute film. And then like a month later, the judge agreed that she did. The prosecutor consented to seeing who this person is, having to reckon with who the family members are who are impacted by this incarceration. And I had no idea, we had no idea what we were just following our gut, you know, we were just sort of like, this is the right thing to do. This is what we came into this work doing. Back to the intention thing was like, all we want to do is free survivors. That was our North Star, whatever that meant, in like, for them to feel freed in their own selves, for them to literally be freed, to continue to feel free after release, you know, that was the goal. But we simply had that North Star. And since then, yeah, we've carried out that work on several other cases with legal teams, and that's the work of Full Picture Studios. And it's been amazing and gratifying and very hard. And we deal with prisons and we deal with lawyers and we deal with, you know, but and the way we go in with it is like, we're not telling this person's story. We're not giving a voice to the voiceless. We just have the tools to help them tell. We're giving them the platform to safely tell their story if they so choose. And sometimes, in some cases, lawyers don't understand how we work. And so that gets exhausting. So even though they're on the side of the person that we're all trying to help, you're having to do a level of educating. So I think, to answer your question of how to not like get bogged down by the policy and the bureaucratic systems, is you really have to pick your battles and understand the intention behind why you picked a particular battle. And also, and this is, I mean, this is me speaking to myself every day. It's like, Natalie, it's not your job to educate literally everyone who doesn't get this in such a specific way. It's okay to step away and say, you know what, this is not the battle I need to have over email right now. Just step away. You know, in certain, like, whether, yeah, and any of those systems, that a court system, I mean, it's taken a lot of restraint to have to do that, but I do feel that certain things I say shorter are felt louder and clearer than me sort of like exhausting myself and being like, why don't you understand? This is like, this is not trauma informed. This is like damaging. This is harmful. I pick now, is this worth my time? Because my time is also non-renewable. Is this worth, you know, the efforts that I'm going to make worth it for this person? And I can almost always see that if I sit down and like just let myself breathe, acknowledging my own triggers and traumas and be like, don't react later, understand what the reaction is that you're having. And so I have to sit and understand if it's my own trigger that's causing me to feel the need to educate people who are very irritating in policy work. And that is hard. I'm very much still working on that, but it has been helpful to like, just sometimes like, you know what, today is not the day that person is going to get an email from me, and walking away.
I think that's great advice for everybody. You don't have to respond to the email immediately. So we're towards the end. If there's anybody in the chat that would like to drop a question for any of our filmmakers, please feel free to do so. But we'll kind of do our wrap-up stuff, which is kind of what's next for your films, what's next for kind of general in life. I hope acorns are on everybody's agenda at this point, but Amrit, what are you working on next? What, you know, anything you want to shout out and all those types of things?
Yeah, I actually, Yen and Natalie, y'all got me thinking about how for the documentary that's in development for me, I am currently thinking a lot about just figuring out how I'm going to do this, but I've realized for myself that I too, in a similar manner, I think I'm not here to like educate every person out there. I've now realized that what I want to be doing with this film is, and a lot of my work is actually putting a mirror to my fellow South Asian folks on reflecting on the fact that like a lot of issues and policies in this country that affect so many other people, especially immigration, LGBTQ+, and disability policies, are not just like white people and other brown people issues. Like a lot of my Punjabi community members sometimes like I've heard this expressed in many spaces, right? They'll be like, oh, it's a Goria de Kamya, or these are like that means like, oh, these are white people things, and for in Punjabi. And so for me, I think what I really, really want people to understand from the documentary work of sharing my own family story and also just going through the process of showing so many other Punjabi immigrant experiences is that it's like we're all connected, right? Like there's so many different people who are affected and also continuously working so hard to make sure that we are advocating for so many different like issues and people's rights that I think sometimes it's difficult to like show the people that we really really care about these things. And I think that through this film I'm going to start advocating like how exactly to do that. So for me, I've actually had success in short form content more than like I've never made a feature film yet. So like I've been making stuff that's shorter and it has reached audiences and it has been successful in showing different communities like the impact that I want to leave with them. But I think for me it's now about like how do I take this and show it to people who are not just my age. Like I want to be reaching elders. I want to be reaching people who don't often go to theaters to see movies and who don't have social media, right? Like I was mentioning. So for me, I'm now navigating that opposite end and also like seeing how I can connect so many different people from different generations and also create intergenerational connections that often are not in my Punjabi Sikh community. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to share. And yeah, thank you for having us and having me. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Amrit. Yin, what is next for you? What is next for the film?
So I think you mentioned that I'm actually in production for an art show that's going to be opening on October 30th at 20 Cooper Square through the APA and CSGS of NYU. So I'm excited for that. And Fly and Power will also be screening at that space on November 28th. I'm going to say, I think that's the date. In terms of the film, I think that I'm so glad to take away a lot of knowledge from here. For me, as I said, we were looking at like slicing the film into adjustable pieces, but I really love this idea too of like really creating an educational short to send to judges and lawyers. Thank you, Natalie, for mentioning that, because yeah, getting the information to the places where unfortunately the people who have the power to make these big decisions over people's lives. I'm going to be really thinking about that too, of how to bring that into the film.
Awesome. And Natalie, what's next for you?
Along with the acorns, of course. Yeah, I think it's giving myself the space to think about it. I am very passionate about the work that we do with Full Picture Studios and have the opportunity to help uplift those stories and hopefully, which hopefully lead to folks' freedom. And but yeah, I mean, we'll see how that goes. Just learning more about who I am creatively, because I think Amrit said it like earlier, or maybe Yin or all of us, it's like you kind of forget who your creative side is or what your creative side is in policy work. It kind of, it's being taken up by a lot of things. So figuring out where I'd like to be. Maybe it's a narrative, maybe it's still in documentary, but like something else, maybe I'll be a barista. I don't know. Like I'm kind of in that space right now, which is a very different space than I've ever been in my life. I feel like I've always sort of had like a plan and this is my goal and like this is how I'll get there. So it's it's just a place of wondering and being curious.
Amazing. Well, thanks to everybody on this panel. Thanks to Ash and Leilani and all of the ADOP team for organizing these. I think links, Ash has been dropping links in the chat. Additional links, I think, for the filmmakers here will also be dropped in the chat. And this panel will also be going up on the YouTube soon, so please do share it with your friends. I think there are lots of really great little learnings that I know that I will be clipping and sharing to some of my friends as they're working on their own kind of impact campaigns and films. So I hope that that type of utility and communication is also something that you'll be curious about. But yeah, thanks so much. Thanks, Ash.
Thank you, Wynton.
Thanks for joining
And
us.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. Have a good one. Bye bye.